Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I hope you're well and welcome back to another video today, talking all things AFL Fantasy. Why? Well, the team at AFL Fantasy have dropped a whole ton of information for us inside the past 24 hours. I want to make sure we walk you through everything that has just been dropped and confirmed as we head into 2024. We'll do a similar episode for you once Dream Team and Supercoach reveal a bunch of new additional information, but at time of recording, they haven't been able to do that just yet. Although that said, the team pickers are being forecast to come out in around about 7 to 10 days. So good news, we should still have them ahead of Christmas 2024. Got a ton of notes, written them down here because my poor little brain ain't going to be able to remember everything. Plus, I wanted to be able to get it to you as soon as we possibly could and unpack all the big news. First up, let's talk salary cap. The guys at AFL Fantasy have confirmed exactly how much coin we will have to start with in our starting squads. It's going to be $15,800,000. If you're wondering what that's like in comparison to 2023, that is up $300,000. It's pretty much Harley Reid given to you for free. We will talk about Harley, no doubt, in a second, but an additional $300,000 does mean great versatility of what you can do in a bunch of different player spots and positions. Your salary cap locked in for 2024. When does the season start? Well, the guys at AFL Fantasy, Warney has been the most vocal about it, but they've really given us enough breadcrumbs throughout the preseason, ever since we did find out that we were going to have this thing called round 0, then the season proper, quote unquote, round 1, and then some additional multi-buy rounds would come until we get further into the season, sort of round 7 onwards, everything commences. They were pretty generous to be fair, and have left a number of breadcrumbs that leads us to a couple of things that I don't think should surprise anyone. Number one is this. The season for us in AFL Fantasy, and again, this video is purely dedicated to AFL Fantasy, for salary cap or classic players, all commences in round 1. Round 0 will count, and we'll get to that in just a second. But round 1 is when it all commences. It's when the rolling lockouts take into effect. And it's also when, after the conclusion of round 1, the player pricings will start to move. So that's a really important thing. A side note for drafts, there are some nice customization tools, apparently, they've been working on that are going to make it really, really easy for teams to be able to navigate. And it will give you the options to be able to start, if you really are a psycho, to start in round 0 if you'd like to do that. There's a bunch of customizations you'll be able to get this year, but round 1, classic salary cap owners, that is when it all does start for us. Now, there's an interesting thing that comes in this, though. Players that play in round 0. Now, there's 8 teams. We've listed them for you. You can see them here on screen. 8 teams are playing in round 0. What they have confirmed for us is this, is that teams that play in round 0, their scores and ultimately their salary movements will be impacted by not just what they score in round 1, but also in round 0. This becomes really important for a player, as an example, like a Brodie Grundy. He's going to be priced at an average of 75, so arguably already coming in at 20 to 30, 35 points per game of value. If he absolutely flies in round 0, and almost regardless of what he does in round 1, there's going to be a significant break-even movement that is going to see his salary potentially really skyrocket up. As an aside, if you've played Supercoach Big Bash, for example, the cricket format of the game, you might be a little bit more familiar with these 2 scores in 1 that really bump the price movements. So this might be an additional strategy piece that, at least for AFL Fantasy, maybe for Supercoach and Dream Team, we'll get it confirmed soon, but at least for AFL Fantasy is something to seriously consider. Conversely, you could look at it at the opposite. The other side, like a Nick Dacos, for example, the most expensive defender in the game. What if he cops a tag in round 0? All of a sudden, now there's a bunch of things that come through. One, the additional buy round that rolls through early. We'll talk about them in a moment. And then a potential Finn McGuinness tag. All of a sudden, a guy that in many eyes is an absolute walk-up lock for round 1 it's a genuine conversation that maybe there's no essential room for him. So I see what they're trying to do to be able to make round zero count a little bit, and also make these players that politely in rounds 2, 3, 5, and 6 without it, you could really struggle to pick a Walsh, a Grundy, a James Jordan, if I'm going really out there, that you could argue with some value. Max Gorn, the list goes on, right? I see what AFL Fantasy are trying to do here to really keep the relevancy of these players by doubling the potential money you could be making early, which will minimize what happens when you don't have them available in rounds 2, 3, 5, and 6. So that's an interesting little thing that we can navigate. We'll unpack that as the season gets going a little bit more and more variables are known, maybe not so much in how it works, but the type of players we could be targeting at. Your early buys of rounds 2, 3, 5, and 6, I've just alluded to them. Again, some breadcrumbs have been left for us in the community, so no one should be surprised. They're going to be best 18 and just the 2 trades per week of use them or lose them. So that's a new thing. So an interesting challenge for us. And does this, hypothetically mean a guns and rooks approach becomes a little bit more valuable early on in the year? Or is it no, double down on the value? It's all about cash generation. As I said, a player like Nick Dacos could be really, really popular. However, a poor round 0 score, a buy round in that first 6 weeks, and a Finn McGuinness tag. Okay, now we're starting to see some potential separation through there. The other block of buy rounds that are in the middle portion of the season, there's no changes to AFL Fantasy and how that's going to play. It's going to be the 4 consecutive weeks. It's best 18, and you will have an increase of 3 trades per week. So a bunch of best 18 elements for us in there, and we'll unpack some of those elements right throughout the season. Because there's been some changes in the front half of the year, there's also some changes to when the dual positions are rolled out during the season. Historically, it's been at the end of round 5, at the end of round 11, and at the end of round 17 that champion data allocate new positions into the format. And then at the start of round 6, 12, and 18, we get them. However, they've delayed just the first block of DPP additions to commence at the end of round 6, so heading into round 7. And that's so that every team has at least the same minimum number of games and no club or player is unfairly disadvantaged. So just try to keep it a level playing field. The back 2 buy rounds, or not buy rounds, sorry, DPP addition rounds, they hold the same spot. So it's just an extra week later of data that we've got to get through there. But I don't think that's anything too drastic that's going to impact strategies of how we head into the season, nor the sort of players that may or may not pick up DPP. We've already talked about the prices that have come through from a salary cap perspective. Let's hit some specific players for in a moment. After an absolute belter of a season last year, the most expensive player in the format is Tim English. No surprise. You should be able to gauge that based off his seasonal average last year. He's going to set you back over $1 million. It's $1,071,000. There's a number of $1 million men, but he is the most expensive. Is there any value in him? No, but you're not picking him for value. You're picking him because of how freaking good he was in 2023. Should you do that, though? That's a conversation that we can have a little bit later on. Let's talk about what it means from us from a cash cows perspective. Over the past number of seasons, 300,000 has been where they've started pick 1 of brand new players into the AFL system, and that holds again. So Harley Reid, $300,000 mid forward. And will he be a popular pick like a lot of highly anticipated number 1 or high end coaches have been picking up, the Ashcrofts and Dacos, etc.? Well, that's again another conversation during the preseason, but he's 300,000. A slight change though in the formula is from this format, then every player picked subsequently in the AFL draft is dropping $3,000 in value to start the year, their price tag. So at Colby McKercher, $297,000. You work your way down. It's pretty much pick 35 in the draft, then the preseason and the rookie drafts. If they haven't played AFL before, They are all then basement price, which again, AFL Fantasy have confirmed is $200,000. So the good news is our overarching salary cap has increased, but the basement of what it means to be the lowest available price of a player in the format has not moved. So that's a really encouraging thing for us to be able to look at through there. Let's talk about a little bit more on player prices. I want to talk magic number. I want to give you an illustration of how it works, and we want to hit some discounts. So let's stay at the discounts. They have always done it a little differently to some of the other formats. So if you've played Supercoach and Dream Team for a long period of time, AFL Fantasy do their discounting differently. Supercoach and Dream Team, for example, plus any player absences based off the previous season's data, so 2023 in our case. However, what AFL Fantasy do, just to try to not make it as easy, I suppose, for sake of a better phrase, is they will price it off the player's highest average of the two most recent seasons. So not as many guys become just obvious, easy selections, I suppose is what they're looking for, and trying to create some diversity. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I understand why they do that. Depending on the amount of games played, they'd miss a certain percent. Generally 10 games is kind of the minimum threshold, then it drops from there, and the percentage discount kind of kicks in. So if they only play 9 games, it's a 3% discount. If it's 8 games, it's 6%. You figure it out. Basically, all you need to know is this. If a player misses a full season, they get a big 30% discount. And that's where someone like a Zach Williams comes into order for us. He's set at $442,000. That's under 50 average. Really makes him an interesting conversation in the preseason, because now this is somebody that has gone high 80s, 90s seasonal averages for us, let alone what he's done in stretches. I know it's not all been at Carlton, but it's in his wheelhouse of scoring. And he now only needs to really go a 75 to be worth value. That's only 140 odd thousand more than Harley Reid, putting that into context. And so now this becomes an interesting one. You can do similar sort of conversations for a Braden Bruce. He missed the whole season. Yep, I managed to get him in. He's one of 2 players I'm going to try to sneak in. Long-term coaches panel fans will get the joke about that. There are some players that have missed more seasons than that, like a Marty Hoare, even a Sam Naismith have been given more significant discounts. But again, they're going to be based off previous seasonal data. And so none of them are going to be a basement price. They're going to be based off 2019, 2020, when they last played games of football. Let's talk quickly about the magic number, and then we will wrap up this episode. The magic number, for those that have never looked too deeply into it, it's basically the number multiplied by the seasonal average of the year gone equals their price point. And so while it's not 100%, because there's always some nuances, then there's the discounts that are applied based off games played, and which seasonal average. Again, AFL Fantasy have done it. So you can't just run a quick, simple Google sheet and run some formulas in Excel and all of a sudden you've got the prices ahead of AFL Fantasy releasing it. There are some elements that are layered through that don't always make it so copy paste problem solved, but it does give you a little bit of an indicator where early days you can kind of jump in and go, all right, now I've got something that I know how to work with. For example, last year, Josh Kelly averaged 98. I'm rounding it up by 0.1, but he averaged 98. That sets him back based on the 90-30 times the 98. That puts him at a price point of $885,000. Yep. Had to get my boy into the video somehow, didn't I? So you can do that the same with guys that you think won't get a discount, but are going to present potentially some significant value. So go and check out a Taylor Adams, for example. Go get his average from last year, multiply it by that 90-30. You've got the average. Sam Walsh, multiply that average. Just round it up if you need to, just to be kind of closer to certain. Round it up. You get the average. Brody Grundy, 75. I think it'll price him under 700,000 for us next year. Sam Walsh will be under 900,000 for us next year. So there's some simple math if you don't want to wait the next couple of weeks before the format opens. And again, nothing's confirmed, but historically they have opened up in January with 1 or 2 exceptions over the past decade. So historically, if you just desperate. Maybe you've got a 50 most relevant that you're planning and you need to get a rough idea on prices. I don't know. That's the way to be able to do it, to at least give you a guide of what they'll be. So 90-30 is the magic number, give or take. And then you just multiply that by the average and you get at least a really close ballpark, minus any discounts allocated by the format, to what their price point will be. And so that's just some of the confirmed changes that are coming for us in AFL Fantasy. And it's really important we understand these. And I did a video a few weeks ago about the fixture. This is just another one of the pieces of the puzzle that help us now put some starting squad and trade cadence strategies together. We now know the AFL fixture. That's locked in for AFL Fantasy. We now know what the starting squad positions will be. That's locked in. Importantly, now 2 new pieces of information are being given. 1, how they're going to handle opening round, and 2, what it means for these teams having buys in the opening 6 weeks of the season. We now have this data, and the magic number gives us an understanding, very early days, even before the format does open up, that we've got a good idea of what our players are going to cost us alongside the salary cap. So we're pretty darn close now to be able to start pulling some threads together in AFL Fantasy, start counting players in and out, start looking a little bit more deeply into what some of the early preseason form of these players has meant through the off-season games, practices. We've got these elements that are starting to come. So it's starting to come together for us in AFL Fantasy. When's the format opening? Again, nothing's been confirmed just yet, but historically it's been early January. They might try to jump into December, but nothing publicly has been confirmed just yet. But that's what we know about AFL Fantasy right now. Supercoach and Dream Team, what are they going to do? Don't know. We should know inside the next week is my estimated inside guess. I think it's going to be the back of the week that this video has been released. We should know by then at least the prices. And then the team picker is historically open inside a week before Christmas, which is available for gold or assistant coach subscribers that have paid for that. So you'll be able to start getting those sort of things. Once the format's open, team pickers or full formats, what we will do here on this channel is I'll do a team reveal for you. I'll let you see my first draft of a team, and then plenty of other content will roll through the preseason, including the 50 most relevant, a brand new podcast, article, and video every single day where I look through who I believe are the most relevant players across Supercoach, Dream Team, and AFL Fantasy. If you've never done a preseason with us here at the Coaches Panel, trust me, you're going to love it. If you don't know what the 50 most relevant is, there'll be a video coming in the next few days that unpacks the concept a little bit before, some of the selection criteria, and then hopefully whets your appetite for what will come from January 1st and the subsequent 50 days of the preseason and of the year 2024. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you're just brand new to the channel, you haven't followed and subscribed, make sure you do that. The links for our social media handles are all inside the description of this video, so make sure you go and check that out. And then one last thing I want to let you know about before we wrap up the video is if you play keeper leagues, if you don't know what they are, then chances are you don't play them. But it's a year-on-year retention draft strategy of ways of playing drafts. The good news is if you do play keeper leagues right throughout the off-season, Kane, a fellow Coaches panelist, and myself have put together our top 50 players into 8 tiers of who we believe are the best players for a keeper league. They are hidden behind a paywall in Patreon. Any tier of our Patreons can get access to it. Again, all the details for that are in the details of this description of the video, and also our Spotify podcast subscribers. So if you listen to podcasts on Spotify, you can go and subscribe through that. There is all of those podcasts are available for you, as well as all of a ton of in-season exclusive content. So you want to make sure you're staying subscribed right throughout 2024 because there's plenty of unique and exclusive content that only the subscribers in Patreon or Spotify get. Depending on the level you sign in at Spotify, well, let's be honest, it's a one-time level. But Patreon, depending on the level, you might not get the Spotify subscriptions of in-season stuff. So make sure you get the right tiers in that Patreon. If you're a Spotify subscriber, every behind the paywall podcast you will get. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. It's getting serious now, isn't it? The preseason of 2024 is just a few days away from really getting moving. And we're so glad we get to do this off season with you as we head into the 2024 Supercoach, AFL Fantasy and Dream Team season.